Yelan Temple exhausted all its resources to push my fiancé, Xiao Chengyun, step by step onto the throne of the Martial Arts Alliance chief. But right after the inauguration ceremony, he called off our engagement on the spot in front of all the world's heroes, turning around to take the hand of that White Lotus from the Yuqing sect. The entire martial arts world pulled up a chair, waiting to watch the Zhongli family throw a huge tantrum and become an absolute laughingstock. But my family didn't even utter a single harsh word. We disbanded the world's finest assassination and intelligence network on the spot, closed our doors, and just farmed and listened to music. Later, when the demonic sect made a comeback and the cold evil poison ran rampant, Xiao Chengyun's makeshift alliance was beaten so badly they cried for their parents. He crawled all the way through the mud on his knees, kowtowing and begging for help. And only then did he finally realize one thing: the rules and the very lifeblood of the entire martial arts world have always been held firmly in the hands of our family who do nothing but slack off every day. The night before Xiao Chengyun's inauguration ceremony, I sat in the attic of the Yelan Pavilion, wiping my 1,000-thread flying needles, when an urgent, confidential letter was delivered to me. Liu Furuo, the daughter of the Yuqing sect's leader, had returned from Jiangnan. I casually tossed the letter into the charcoal brazier, where the tongues of fire licked it, burning it to ashes. The next morning, bells and drums chimed in unison at the alliance leader's peak, and the various orthodox sects packed the main hall to the brim. I followed behind my mother, Pei Guanlin, and took my seat at the main table. Xiao Chengyun, clad in black robes embroidered with reddish gold, stood at the top of the high platform, looking absolutely high-spirited. Beside him stood a delicate woman in plain white silk, the corners of her eyes flushed red. It was none other than Liu Furuo. The entire hall whispered in hushed tones, as over 100 pairs of eyes all stabbed directly at me. Xiao Chengyun drew from his robe the nine-eyed Daizai bead betrothal token I had hand-carved. With a sudden release of internal energy from his palm, there came a sharp crack. The rare Daizai bead shattered into dust, slipping through his fingers and scattering at his feet.
The Nightland sect acts with ruthless cruelty and has blood on its hands. As a leader of the righteous path, I, Xiao, will never associate with the demonic sect. Today, before the heroes of the realm, I declare the annulment of my betrothal to Zhongli Xiang.
His voice, laced with powerful inner energy, echoed through the grand hall, making the glazed tiles on the roof buzz and vibrate. He turned around and affectionately took Liu Furuo's hand.
Furuo is my destined alliance, chief's lady.
The crowd below instantly erupted into a commotion. Several sects eagerly voiced their approval.
Well said, Chief Xiao. I support you.
I sat in my armchair, not even lifting my eyelids. My mother, Pei Guanlin, picked up her celadon teacup, blew on the floating leaves, and let out a cold laugh. The laugh wasn't loud, yet it clearly drowned out the clamor of the entire hall. The wife of the Yuqing sect's leader, Wen Chuniang, squeezed forward from the crowd, wearing her trademark benevolent smile.
Sister Pei, young people's feelings cannot be forced. Chengyun and our Furuo are mutually in love. The methods of your Yelan temple are well known to everyone. Out of respect for old times, Chengyun is still willing to save you some face.
Wen Chuniang walked closer, raising her voice.
Why don't we letting Shangar compromise a bit and become an equal wife? From now on, you can live harmoniously as one family. Our Yuqing sect will also look out for you more. Ha ha ha.
Pei Guanlin set down her teacup, smoothed the gold-threaded cloud patterns on her sleeves, and stood up in a slow, deliberate manner. In the next instant, she raised her leg and kicked. The priceless, golden-thread Phoebe wood tea table in front of her flew into the air, shattering to pieces in midair. Scalding tea mixed with splintered wood crashed down noisily, right at Wen Chuniang's feet. Wen Chuniang shrieked in terror, taking 3 steps back and nearly falling over. The grand hall instantly fell dead silent.
What kind of thing do you think you are? To be worthy of calling me sister, treating a self-righteous hypocrite like a treasure, and expecting my daughter to settle for less.
Her voice was crisp and powerful as her words rang out.
A daughter of the Zhongli family, even if she were to keep 100 male concubines, it would still never be the turn of an ungrateful beast like him to disgust us.
Xiao Chengyun's face turned livid with rage. He pointed at my mother and roared angrily.
Pei Guanlin, how dare you? Today is the grand ceremony of my inauguration as the alliance chief. How dare you behave so wildly here?
I stood up and shielded my mother, staring directly at the man on the high platform whom I had protected for 3 whole years. The scale of this grand ceremony was funded with hard cash from our Yelan Hall. The soft gold thread armor you are wearing was sewn overnight by my brother, and the alliance chief's throne under your feet was won for you by my father, blade by blade. As he fought and paved your way, I spoke each word very slowly. Without Yelan Hall, you would still be performing on the streets begging for food. Hearing these words, Liu Furuo's tears fell like a broken string of pearls. She clutched Xiao Chengyun's sleeve tightly, her body swaying as if about to collapse.
Sister Zhongli, how can you humiliate Brother Yun like this? This position of alliance chief is something he won back with his own true talent.
Exactly, that is right.
Yelan Hall is used to bullying others with its power. Do you really think the entire martial arts world is afraid of you? As the Alliance Chief, I declare here today that from this day forward, the righteous sex will have no place for you.
Without the title of the Alliance Chief's wife, let's see who in this world would dare to marry a malicious woman like you.
I let out a laugh and raised my hand to pull out the jade hairpin that symbolized the young hallmaster of Yelan Hall from my hair. Snap. I snapped it in two and tossed it onto the ground. Since you cherish this trashy alliance leader position so much, why don't you hold on to him and drown in a cesspool? I turned to support my mother's arm. Mother, the show is over. Let's go. In the grand hall where all the sects of the world gathered, the two of us, mother and daughter, straightened my back and strode out of the threshold. Behind us came Xiao Chengyun's impotent, raging roar. I didn't even turn my head. Upon returning to the Zhongli manor, the main gates were locked. A series of coughs came from the courtyard.
Is it called off?
It is called off.
He tossed the hoe into the corner of the wall and wiped his face haphazardly with a sweat towel. My brother Zhongli was sitting on the steps of the veranda, holding a carving knife and focusing intently on shaping a wooden bird.
Called off.
I nodded. Pei Guanlin walked over to the armchair and sat down, picking up a cup of cold tea and taking a large gulp.
That bunch of hypocrites even threatened to blacklist us.
Zhongli Xiang slapped his thigh and laughed heartily.
Staying up every night these past years to kill people made my chronic leg pain so bad I couldn't sleep all night. Now, I can finally grow Chinese cabbages in peace.
In order to develop an antidote pill for him, the skin on my hands peeled from testing the herbs. Whoever wants to manage this mess can have it. As for me, I'm closing my doors to work on my carpentry.
Looking at the three of them showing absolutely no attachment to their past roles, the heavy stone in my heart finally dropped. Xiao Chengyun only knew that Yelan Yuan had a fearsome reputation, but he had no idea what Yelan Yuan's true trump cards were. My father was the world's top assassin. My mother was the living god of wealth behind the Juzhou Bank and the Canal Gang. My brother was the world's top master of venomous medicine and mechanical engineering. Just to put him into that position, our entire family hid our brilliance and forced ourselves to pretend to be the tools that did his dirty work. Passed down my order. Yelan Yuan is disbanded immediately. I gave the command to the empty courtyard wall. From the shadows, the faint rustle of clothing could be heard. 800 shadow death warriors completely vanished without a trace at this very moment. Since he wants to use us as stepping stones to establish his authority, we might as well just pack up and leave. Let's see how many days he can last alone in this shattered and crumbling martial arts world. Just one day later, Xiao Chengyun impatiently issued a martial world ban, strictly forbidding any sect from associating with the Zhongli family. Immediately after, he forcibly took over Yelan Temple's defense sectors and intelligence networks. Defense sectors and intelligence networks. We didn't say a single word in protest. We simply handed over all the defense command tokens. Xiao Chengyun thought he had completely defanged the Zhongli family. Xiao Chengyun immediately appointed his general. He appointed Liu Furuo's eldest brother to guard the strategic pass against the demon sect in the northwest, and dispatched Liu Furuo's second brother to take over the Jiangnan intelligence network to investigate a cold case. When the news reached the Zhongli manor, the four of us were sitting in the courtyard happily eating roasted sweet potatoes.
The eldest Liu brother's hands shake, just holding a sword. Yet he is going to the northwest to face those lunatics.
I've heard of that Jiangnan case too. They specifically target people to skin them alive.
Sure enough, 3 days later, a hilarious scandal erupted in the martial arts world in the northwest. Just after taking over the defense, the eldest Liu brother heard the remnants of the demon sect playing bone flutes in the middle of the night. He wet his pants on the spot, abandoned the hundreds of disciples stationed there overnight, and fled back to the central plains on a fast horse in one breath. Meanwhile, the second Liu brother went to investigate the Jiangnan cold case. He stumbled upon a skinless, headless corpse in a mass grave, and was instantly driven mad with terror. Now, he kneels and kowtows to everyone he meets, crying out for mercy from his ancestors. In his fury to suppress this scandal, Xiao Chengyun smashed 3 armchair seats to pieces in the grand hall. But there are no secrets in this world. The storytellers in all the major tea houses had already turned the incident into comedy routines, performing different versions every single day. The gates of the Zhongli manor remained tightly shut. Every day was nothing but eating and sleeping. Life in slacker mode couldn't have been more comfortable. More than half a month passed, and the Liu family became the laughingstock of the martial arts world. In order to restore the Liu family's lost face, when Chu Jinglie decided to host a grand martial arts conference, she widely distributed invitations, inviting heroes from all over the world to gather at the Yuqing sect. On the surface, it was to test their martial arts skills, but in secret, she wanted to use Liu Furuo's status as the alliance leader's wife to show off her power.
Madam, the Yuqing sect has sent an invitation.
The housekeeper walked into the main hall, holding a gold-embossed invitation. My father didn't even raise his head, continuing to study the wormholes on a cabbage leaf. Pei Guanlin took the invitation and glanced at it.
I heard Xiao Chengyun took the spot that originally belonged to your father to fight and directly awarded it to the Yuqing sect.
Yes. She looked at me. I nodded. Pei Guanlin slammed the invitation down onto the table.
A bunch of frogs in a well really think we're easy targets. Xiang, change your clothes. Mother is going to take you to open your eyes today and teach them what a real beatdown looks like.
On the day of the conference, the Yuqing sect was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. Women from various prestigious families, dressed in gorgeous outfits, crowded the viewing platform to compare their clothes and jewelry. My mother and I deliberately dawdled for half an hour. When we stepped through the gate of the venue, the originally chattering viewing platform instantly fell dead silent. Countless gazes were fixed firmly upon us. Those were looks of shock mixed with intense jealousy. My mother didn't wear her usual tight-fitting clothes that were easy to move in. She was draped in a piece of shimmering South Sea shark silk, the material reflecting water like ripples under the sun. There wasn't a second piece like it in the entire martial arts world. On her head, she wore a full set of top-grade blood jade hairpins, red as dripping blood. I wore a long dress of plain snow silk, with a night-shining pearl the size of a longan hanging from my waist. As the two of us stood there, the outfits of those so-called prestigious young ladies around us instantly looked like worthless scraps. The Yuqing sect disciple leading the way stared blankly with wide eyes.
A reward for your hard work leading the way.
My mother casually grabbed a large handful of gold leaves from her sleeve pocket and stuffed them directly into the disciple's arms. The heavy weight made the disciple stumble backward. That single handful of gold leaves was worth 10 years of salary for an ordinary Yuqing sect disciple. The entire crowd gasped in unison. Those noble ladies who usually prided themselves on being aloof and pure all turned green with envy.
Hasn't this Zhongli family been banned by the alliance leader? How do they still have the nerve to come here and make fools of themselves?
A woman sitting in the front row spoke in a sarcastic, mocking tone. She was the wife of the master of the Jiangnan Thunderbolt Hall, who spent every day tailing Wen Chunjiang to curry favor.
Reeking of filthy lucre, ruining a perfectly good weapon exhibition, and making it so vulgar.
She rolled her eyes with a face full of disgust. My mother stopped in her tracks, turned around, and stared at her.
Reeking of filthy lucre.
My mother stepped forward, directly picked up a cup of scalding hot tea from the table, and suddenly exerted force with her wrist. With a loud bang, the thick celadon teacup was crushed into fine powder right in my mother's palm. The scalding hot tea, mixed with broken porcelain shards, splattered all over the face of the Thunderbolt Hall master's wife. A shriek like a slaughtered pig echoed through the venue. All the ladies in the crowd panicked and fell into chaos, standing up one after another to dodge.
Even if I reek of filthy lucre, I'm still better off than a penniless wretch like you, who can't even afford to patch up her own scabbard.
You dare lay a hand on me?
What? Is your Thunderbolt Hall so poor that you can't even afford to pay for this cheap tea set?
The Thunderbolt Hall master's wife was so intimidated by that undisguised killing intent that she stood with her mouth half open, unable to make another sound. Wen Chunjiang, flanked by several maidservants, rushed over in a hurry. She wore an elaborate skirt embroidered with 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix, putting on the full, grand display of a matriarch.
Sister Pei, what is the meaning of this? Why fly into such a massive rage for no reason?
With a fake smile plastered on her face, she walked over to my mother and deliberately lowered her voice.
I know you are harboring resentment, but Chengyun canceling your qualification to fight is also for your own good.
Wen Chunjiang dabbed the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief.
The man of of your house is a cripple, and your son has gone mad. Who is left among you to take the stage? My own 2 boys, for the sake of righteousness in the Jianggu, were severely wounded in the northwest and Jiangnian. They were defeated, but gloriously so. It is only right and proper that this slot goes to the Yuqing sect.
Looking at her shameless, gloating face, I really couldn't help but burst out laughing. Defeated but gloriously? The eldest Liu brother fled right before the battle. He should have faced the death penalty of 3 blades and 6 holes long ago. The second Liu brother went to a brothel, got into a jealous brawl, and was beaten into an idiot. And yet the Yuqing sect promotes such useless, good-for-nothing trash as heroes. Aren't you embarrassed?
What nonsense are you spouting, you wretched wench?
Just as when Kunyang was about to fly into a rage, a sharp, urgent announcement suddenly echoed from outside the venue. A messenger wearing the uniform of the Alliance leader's peak came scrambling and crawling into the viewing platform. The messenger fell to his knees with a thud.
The northwestern defensive line has completely fallen. The eldest young master Liu fled on his own accord. The demonic cult has breached 3 cities in a row. Countless citizens have been killed or wounded.
There are also reports from the Jiangnian branch. The second young master Liu was not attacked while investigating a case at all. He was fighting over a courtesan at the Misty Rain brothel and was beaten into an idiot.
These 2 bolts from the blue struck Wen Chunyang squarely on the head. Her eyes widened in sheer disbelief.
Bullshit. You are talking absolute nonsense.
It is absolutely true, madam. The whole world knows about it now.
Wen Chunyang's body swayed violently twice, pointing at the sky with her mouth wide open, making a strange wheezing sound in her throat. Her vision blurred, and she foamed at the mouth in sheer rage on the spot, collapsing straight to the ground. The venue instantly fell into utter chaos. The maids shrieked as they rushed over to press her acupressure points. My mother and I calmly and steadily walked over to the main table and sat down. We each poured a cup of pre-rain Longjing tea and leisurely sipped our tea. Once we had our fill of this chaotic farce, my mother stood up.
The tea gets bitter when it goes cold.
I supported her arm, and as mother and daughter, under the watchful eyes of all the martial artists, filled with both dread and awe, we made our graceful exit. Just as we were about to step out the main gate, I keenly caught a gaze coming from a corner. Xiao Chengyun stood far off in the shade of a tree, staring venomously at our retreating figures. The evaluation assembly turned into an absolute laughingstock. The scandal of the Liu brothers spread far and wide across the lands. To appease the people, Xiao Chengyun was forced to personally send men to the northwest and Jiangnian to suppress the chaos. Without the intelligence network of the Yalon Hall, his men ran around blindly like headless flies. During this period, several bizarre murders broke out one after another in the martial arts world. Several highly respected leaders of small sects died in their rooms overnight. Their deaths incredibly gruesome, their bodies shriveled, and their qi and blood completely drained. To the outside world, it was claimed they all died from qi deviation during cultivation. Late one night, my brother, Zhongli Xiang, stepped into the main hall with a solemn expression. He threw the sheepskin gloves, stained with the stench of corpses, into the brazier to burn. My father stopped wiping his hoe and looked up at him.
I secretly went to examine 2 of the corpses.
Zhongli, he ladled some cold water to wash his hands, his voice as cold as ice.
It wasn't qi deviation at all. It is the blood fiend demonic art, which has been lost for a century.
My heart suddenly skipped a beat. The blood fiend demonic art.
It requires continuously absorbing the inner strength of other martial arts masters. Once one is tainted by it, they will completely turn into a bloodthirsty monster. No wonder Xiao Chengyun was in such a hurry to call off the engagement and disband the Shadow Hall. He was afraid my shadow guard would notice he was secretly practicing this evil technique. Xiao Chengyun is of mediocre talent. To secure his position, he actually resorted to such a desperate path. Let's bide our time and continue to lie low for now. Let's see how much longer this hypocrite can hold out. Send word to our former subordinates to keep a close eye on every move on Alliance Master's peak. Xiao Chengyun is playing with fire. We will just watch quietly and see how he brings about his own destruction. He is the one who completely upturned this chessboard.
Being cooped up in the manor for days was truly suffocating. Early in the morning, I put on my bamboo hat and went out, planning to go to the market to look for a few rare stones for carving. My brother wasn't at ease, so he sent his personal shadow guard, Xiao Yu, to follow me. Xiao Yu was a delicate, deaf-mute girl. With her superb lightness skills, she always remained hidden in the shadows. As I walked through a remote, narrow alley on West Street, a strong scent of blood rushed straight into my nose. At the end of the alley, 7 or 8 masked men in black had someone cornered tightly against the wall. The man was wearing ragged white clothes and knelt on one knee, his hand tightly gripping a broken, heavy black iron saber. Blood flowed from his shoulder, all the way down to the hilt of the blade end.
Hey beggar, be smart and hand over that jade pendant. It is something the Alliance Master's wife has taken a fancy to. How dare you refuse to give it up?
It was Liu Furuo's dogs again. Relying on Xiao Chengyun's name, the death warriors raised by the Liu family would buy and sell by force out in the open. This had already become a common sight. The man in white lifted his head, his facial features cold and hard, his eyes revealing the fierce aura of a cornered wolf. He tightly clutched a coarse cloth bundle in his arms, uttering not a single word. Seeing that the man refused to be compliant, the leading death warrior waved his hand and ordered his men to hack him to pieces. To seize the item, several steel sabers slashed in unison toward his vital points. The man was severely injured, and his steps were unsteady, clearly having been poisoned by tendon relaxing powder. In the end, he was outnumbered. A deep, bone-deep gash was slashed violently across his back. The man let out a muffled groan and collapsed heavily to the ground. I stood at the entrance of the alley. I was originally too lazy to mind other people's business, but hearing that they were the Liu family's dogs made my anger flare up instantly. I reached up and took off my bamboo hat, then drew the 1,000-thread flying needles from my sleeve. With a light flick of my wrist, 3 silver lights flashed as fast as lightning. The leading assassin, who was just about to deliver the finishing blow, let out a miserable shriek. His steel saber fell to the ground with a clang. 3 flying needles precisely sealed his vital acupoints, and his entire body instantly froze on the spot, unable to move. The remaining assassins were pale with fright. They turned around one after another and pointed their sabers at me.
Who are you? How dare you meddle in the business of the Yuqing sect?
Stepping onto the blue stone pavement, I walked into the alley, looking coldly at this group of trash. You don't even recognize me, yet you dare to run wild and bite people on the streets? One of the assassins caught a clear view of my face in the light. Their legs went weak with fear.
Lady Zhongli.
Although the Yelan Hall was gone, the title of the living king of hell of the 1,000-thread flying needles had long been engraved into the very bones of the people in the martial arts world. I kicked away the steel saber on the ground. I'm buying this man's life. Scram back and tell Liu Furuo that if she is not satisfied, she can drag herself to the Zhongli Manor to find me. The several assassins looked at each other, not daring to utter another word. They hoisted up their frozen leader and fled the alley, scrambling and crawling away. I turned around and looked at the white-clothed man lying in a pool of blood. He was panting heavily, staring at me vigilantly. Just as I was about to speak, his eyes rolled back and he collapsed heavily at my feet. The coarse cloth bundle in his arms fell open, and a dark green jade pendant with a missing corner rolled out. The moment I saw the jade pendant, my heart suddenly skipped a beat. That was the property of my father, Zhongli Xiang. In his early years, he traveled far and wide and never let it leave his side, but it was mysteriously lost 10 years ago. I immediately made a hand gesture. Xiao Yu emerged from the shadows, heaved the unconscious man in black onto his shoulder, and quickly followed me. Returned to the secret villa outside the city. The villa's secret room. My brother, Zhongli He, took some shears and cut open the man's blood-stained white robe.
I have never seen anyone injured so severely. Old scars overlapped with new wounds. It was simply too gruesome to look at. He was poisoned with a variation of arsenic and muscle, relaxing powder. His will to live is incredibly strong, and no one else would have been dead by now. After a full 2 hours of racing against death, the man's life was finally saved.
My father rushed to the villa overnight upon receiving the news. I looked at my father in shock. Father, do you know him? Who on earth is he?
10 years ago, I went to the border on an assassination mission and was trapped in Death Valley by 3,000 elite enemy troops. I thought I was surely dead, but back then, he was only 13 or 14, leading a black iron formation. He dug me out from the pile of corpses.
I stood frozen in place, and a distant memory suddenly surged into my mind. When I was 10 years old, I snuck off to the border behind my mother's back to find my father. I encountered a blizzard halfway there and hid in a cave. Lying inside the cave was a blood-covered boy who was burning with a high fever. The outside of the cave was crawling with searching enemy soldiers. I tore my personal handkerchief to bandage him and watched over him all night. When he woke up the next day, he asked for my name, and then he vanished. I stared at the cold, stern face on the bed, which gradually overlapped with the image of the blood-stained boy from back then. His name was Chu Jinglie. 3 days later, Chu Jinglie finally opened his eyes. His first instinct was to reach for his broken saber nearby. Only when he realized he was in a clean guest room did he slightly lower his guard. I walked in carrying a bowl of medicine. He stared straight at me, his eyes swirling with emotion.
You saved me again.
His voice was dry and raspy, and his single sentence immediately froze me in my tracks. He recognized me. He knew that the person in the cave 10 years ago was me.
The jade pendant is the token of faith you left me 10 years ago. This time I came to the Central Plains intending to bring him news. To my surprise, that those mad dogs from the Liu family would pursue me relentlessly on the way.
I handed him the medicine bowl. Who on earth are you? Why does the Liu family want to kill you? He didn't answer. He tilted his head back and drank the bitter medicine in one gulp.
What Liu Furuo wants is not the jade pendant, but what lies behind the jade pendant. He knows this thing is related to the forces beyond the border.
Chu Jinglie looked up, her eyes like daggers.
Their members secretly breached the defenses in the northwest and led a group of death warriors from beyond the border into the Central Plains. He wants to use the hands of foreign enemies to eliminate his rivals.
A sudden chill ran down my spine. For the position of Alliance Chief, this hypocrite went so far as to insanely collude with foreign enemies. Before Chu Jinglie's injuries had fully healed, he left quietly the very next night. Without even leaving a word of farewell, he only left a note pressed on the table with 4 words, cold evil goo poison. Holding the note, I immediately went to find my father and brother. The real bloodbath in the martial world was about to begin. Less than half a month after Chu Jinglie left, in several major provinces of Jiangnan and the Central Plains, an extremely terrifying plague suddenly broke out. Those infected initially felt only coldness in their hands and feet. Within a few days, their blood would coagulate, their skin would turn stiff and blue, and finally, their hearts would freeze, causing them to freeze to death under the scorching sun. This was the incredibly sinister, cold evil goo poison from beyond the border. The entire martial world fell into absolute chaos. To suppress the news and preserve his prestige as Alliance Chief, Xiao Chengyun not only failed to organize doctors to save lives, but instead ordered that all infected commoners and low-level disciples be driven out of the city. Thousands of people were wailing and waiting for death in the barren mountains and wild ridges. Yet, in this deadly disaster, the Liu mother and daughter smelled the stench of gold and silver. When Chunyang caught wind of the news that neutralizing the cold fiend Giu required herbs of extreme yang property, such as fiery sungrass and fire Lingjie, he had gone completely mad. She sold all of the Liu family's fields and estates, pawned her ancestral jewelry, and even kept Xiao Chengyun in the dark. As she went to the black market to borrow high-interest loans at astronomical rates, she went on a frenzied buying spree, monopolizing all the extreme yang herbs on the market, and instantly driving the prices up tenfold. A single stalk of fiery sungrass, which usually cost just a few taels of silver, soared straight to an astronomical price. Countless commoners lost everything they had, yet still couldn't afford the medicine, watching their loved ones die miserable deaths before their eyes. The threshold of the Liu family pharmacy was worn down by people constantly bowing and begging.
If you don't have money, get lost and go die. The Yuqing sect doesn't support freeloaders.
She sat in the back hall of the pharmacy, clicking away on her abacus and counting the blood-stained banknotes, unable to contain her grinning face. This wicked business completely crossed the line of my mother, Pei Guanlin.
Profiteering from a national disaster. Do they think everyone at our Juzhou Bank is dead? Send word to all branches of Juzhou Bank to cut off all of the Liu family's lifelines. Any herb merchants doing business with the Liu family shall have their financing halted immediately.
For cash flow, those astronomically priced herbs were completely unnecessary. This preemptive strike instantly severed the Liu family's escape route. Right after, my brother Zhongli, sporting dark circles under his eye, emerged from the medicine refining room with a prescription filled with writing in his hand. Xiao Yu was carrying a steaming bowl of dark medicine.
Boiling the most common perilla and cinnamon twigs with old camphor leaves, supplemented by the qi circulating acupuncture technique, and I can easily cure this goo poison.
I glanced at the prescription. It turned out they were all the cheapest, most common herbs found all over the mountains. The kind of stuff where a single coin could buy a whole cartload. The Liu family was going to lose everything they had this time. My mother suddenly stood up and mobilized the herb gang on the spot, utilizing dozens of large merchant ships. In just one night, thousands of tons of alternative herbs were shipped into the major disaster areas along the waterways. Medical tents were set up in the central plazas of the cities. Our entire clan mobilized. The herbs were free, distributed to anyone who needed them. I personally personally led our people to teach the qi circulating acupuncture technique openly on the streets. The commoners and martial artists who had been driven to a dead end instantly grabbed onto this lifeline, the queues stretched out like long dragons, with a bowl of hot medicine poured down their throats and a few silver needles inserted into their acupoints. In less than half an hour, the stiff, bluish bodies miraculously regained their warmth. The panic over the 5-day cold fiend poison was completely suppressed. The hoard of herbs that Wen Chunyang had stockpiled was completely ruined, becoming nothing but a pile of useless hay. No one would take them even if she paid them. The Liu family's cash flow collapsed instantly. The herb merchants who had followed their lead to supply them nearly smashed the Liu family's front gates to pieces. Thugs from the black market loan sharks rushed directly into the Liu family mansion, smashing everything in sight. They threatened that if the money wasn't repaid, they would cut off the limbs of the eldest Liu brother to feed the dogs. Wen Chunyang was scared out of her wits. With disheveled hair, she ran to the alliance leader's peak.
My dear daughter, quickly bring some silver to save your eldest brother. The Liu family is going to ruin.
To maintain her lofty and untainted image in front of Xiao Chengyun, Liu Furuo stubbornly refused to even open the gate. She merely sent a rough workmaid out to deliver her words.
The madam says the alliance leader's treasury is empty with no spare money. The old matriarch should find her own way.
Wen Chunyang sat slumped on the ground, unable to believe her own ears. Pouring rain began to fall from the sky. With nowhere else to turn for help, she stumbled along, unexpectedly running to the Zhongli family's medical tent outside the city. My mother was standing under the tent, directing the workers to move the medicine. Looking like a drowned ghost, Wen Chunyang rushed up and pointed at my mother, cursing loudly.
Pei Guanlin, you black-hearted, venomous woman. You set this trap to ruin me on purpose. You just couldn't bear to see the Liu family prosper. You are driving me to my ruin.
While howling, she reached out to flip the table used for brewing medicine. Quick with my hands, I raised my leg and kicked her right in the back of her knee. Wen Chunyang let out a miserable shriek and fell with a thud, kneeling in the muddy puddle. My mother looked down at her coldly, like looking at a stray dog drenched in the rain, without a single shred of pity in her eyes.
Set a trap for you. You chose to take out those high-interest loans yourself. You chose to raise the price of the medicine yourself. When you were sucking blood from a pile of corpses, did you ever think retribution would fall upon your own head?
The surrounding commoners who came for the medicine pointed and stared at her, nearly drowning her in their spit and criticism. Wen Chunyang's face was deathly pale, completely devoid of color. Yet she still stubbornly refused to admit her defeat.
My daughter is the alliance leader's wife. How dare you humiliate me like this?
That precious daughter of yours wouldn't even let you through her front gate, and yet you're still here dreaming your grand dreams.
Pei Guanlin slapped away her very last shred of dignity. Wen Chunyang's blood rushed to her head, and her hand pointing at us shook like a leaf. A harsh, grating shriek squeezed out of her throat.
My money, my herbs. How could this be?
Overcome by extreme rage and anxiety, she went completely mad and became crippled. For the rest of her life, she could only beg for food at the street corner. Once the cold frost poison was suppressed, the martial arts world caught its breath for a brief moment. But this fleeting peace was merely the final disguise before the storm. Xiao Chengyun's blood fiend, demonic art, could no longer be suppressed at all. Late at night on Alliance Leader Peak, miserable and horrific shrieks would echo from time to time. The inner energy of ordinary disciples could no longer satisfy his appetite. He needed the essence and blood of top-tier masters to cover his tracks. Xiao Chengyun went completely mad. He actually went so far as to actively open up the most important defensive fortress line of the Central Plains to lure foreign enemy troops into the country. Under the pretext of wartime chaos, he issued a forced conscription order, leading the leaders and elite disciples of all major sects entirely to the front lines, planning to drain them dry in the midst of the chaotic battle. Even more ruthlessly, he issued the highest-level Alliance Master's execution order. The charge: the Zhongli family had colluded with the demonic cult and secretly spread the cold chill goo poison. He demanded the righteous sects of the martial arts world immediately besiege the Zhongli estate. It is pure slander. His true purpose was to harvest my father's unfathomably deep, century-old cultivation. On the morning the execution order was delivered, the Zhongli estate was already surrounded as tight as an iron barrel. All kinds of greedy martial arts scoundrels held torches and carried sabers and swords, clamoring to raze the Zhongli family to the ground, divide up our family assets, enforce justice on behalf of heaven, and slay the demonic cult heretics. The shouting and killing cries shook the sky. Inside the estate, our family of 4 sat in the front hall. No one spoke. There was only the rustling sound of cotton cloth wiping blades. My father stood up, tore off his tattered, gray cloth shirt, changed into a form-fitting, black night suit, and walked over to the weapon rack. With a sudden pull, he drew Shadow Piercer, the divine assassination weapon dusty for 10 years. As the dual daggers left their sheaths, killing intent surged straight to the root. His gray hair moved on its own without any wind. Where was there even a single trace of his old, arthritic lethargy?
Holding it in for all these years. Even the joints of my bones have rusted.
My brother changed into a snow-white robe. Between his slender fingers, he held several pills of throat-sealing poison.
Today, I'll teach them the meaning of true deadly cunning.
The main gate banged loudly from the battering ram, with the roaring sound of wood splintering under the heavy load. The two ironclad gates collapsed with a crash. A dense crowd carrying sabers and spears surged into the courtyard. The moment their front feet stepped over the threshold, my father's figure had already vanished from the spot. In the next instant, the three swordsmen rushing at the very front had their throats burst open with sprays of blood all at once. Without making a single sound, they fell straight to the ground. The crowd instantly erupted into a commotion. Isn't Zhongli Xiang supposed to be crippled? Before they could recover from their shock, my brother strolled into the crowd as if taking a leisurely walk. His white robes remained completely spotless. With a casual wave of his hands, a faint pink mist burst into the air. The faces of those who inhaled the mist instantly contorted in agony. They clawed at their own necks like madmen, tearing out handfuls of their own flesh and blood.
It is poison, retreat quickly.
Those in front desperately tried to shrink back, trampling over one another. With a light tap of my toes, I leaped onto the roof eaves, looking down at this rabble from above. My hands flew in rapid motion. Thousands of flying needles poured down like a torrential rain, and the silver thread sealed off all avenues of retreat. Every single needle was precisely pinned into the enemy's kneecaps and major wrist acupoints. In the span of half an incense stick, the hundreds of attackers were completely wiped out. The entire courtyard was filled with useless trash rolling on the ground, clutching their legs and wailing. With a flick of his wrist, my father shook the blood droplets off his dual daggers.
With just this level of mediocre skill, you dare come to our door seeking death.
My mother stood under the veranda, smoothing my collar for me.
Move faster. The pork rib soup is still simmering on the stove.
The flames of war at the border lit up half the sky. Thinking the defensive line was wide open, the foreign enemy invaded in full force, preparing to drive straight into the heart of the Central Plains, only to run headfirst into a black wall of iron. It was a heavily armored cavalry unit, radiating a terrifying aura of death. The leading commander wore heavy black and gold armor, holding a fearsome, massive, horse-killing glaive in his hand. He was none other than Chu Jinglie, the heir of the border-guarding king. As 30,000 heavy cavalry trampled over them, the enemy's vanguard was instantly routed and scattered. Chu Jinglie raised his blade and struck down an enemy.
All officers and soldiers, hear my command. Follow me into the pass. Purge the rebels, and pacify the martial world.
The neighing of war horses shattered the very clouds. By the time the three of us fought our way up to the Alliance leader's peak, outside the main hall, blood had already flowed into rivers. Those death warriors trained by Xiao Chengyun could not stop our unstoppable advance at all. With a kick, the heavy red-lacquered hall doors burst open, revealing a sickening scene inside the main hall. Suffering from the backlash of his cultivation style, Xiao Chengyun had completely lost his human appearance. His eyes were blood red, his hair disheveled and wild and foul. Rancid saliva dripped from the corners of his mouth. Seeing that his cause was lost, he actually choked Liu Furuo in a death grip.
It is all your fault, you thief. Give me your internal energy quickly.
He opened his mouth, frantically sucking Liu Furuo's essence and blood. Liu Furuo was scared out of her wits. Driven by a desperate will to live, she suddenly pulled out a golden bamboo hairpin from her hair. Mustering all her strength, she plunged it hard into Xiao Chengyun's heart. Xiao Chengyun let out a heart-wrenching, agonizing shriek. Releasing his grip, he stared in disbelief at the poisoned hairpin in his chest, and then at the pure, flawless, white moonlight before him.
You thief. How dare you kill me?
If you don't die, I will. You monster.
The two of them collapsed into a pool of blood, tearing and biting at each other, hurling vile curses in a tangled mess. Standing outside the threshold, I watched this dog-eat-dog spectacle. My stomach churned with utter disgust. The heavy clanking of armor sounded outside the hall. Chu Jinglie, dragging a dripping, blood-stained long saber, strode into the hall with large steps, exuding a fierce, battle-hardened aura. He walked over to my side and stood shoulder to shoulder with me. When Xiao Chengyun saw Chu Jinglie, he retreated in sheer terror, knocking over the dragon throne behind him.
You You are the heir of the border guarding king.
Chu Jinglie didn't even spare him a direct look. He raised his leg and delivered a swift kick. Xiao Chengyun was sent flying over 10 meters away, crashing heavily against a coiled dragon pillar. The dull sound of fracturing bones echoed through the hall. Chu Jinglie walked forward. He flicked the tip of his blade, swiftly severing his hand tendons and completely crushing his ankle tendons. Now, there wasn't a trace of warmth left in his core.
Throw this trash along with that woman into the icy dungeon below.
The ironclad guards rushed in to drag them away. Liu Furuo lunged forward like a madwoman, clinging desperately to Chu Jinglie's leather boots.
Spare me, heir. I was forced into this by Xiao Chengyun. If you just let me go, I'll do anything.
She looked up with a pitiful, tearful face, trying to make one last desperate struggle. With utter disgust in his eyes, Chu Jinglie swung his blade with a backhand, slicing her waist-length hair clean off, and kicked her straight out the door. The once insufferably arrogant Alliance Master and his beloved White Moonlight were reduced to mere filth in the dungeon. Following the battle at Alliance Master Peak, the martial world underwent a massive reshuffling. Those sects that had kicked us while we were down now lined up outside the Zhongli Manor every day, carrying gold bars to beg for forgiveness. My father didn't even open the gates, leaving them to kneel in the pouring rain for 3 days and 3 nights. Yelan Hall was not rebuilt. My father said that growing vegetables and raising flowers was much more interesting than slitting throats. My mother continued to expand the network of the Juzhou banks, gaining absolute control over the trade routes of Jiangnan. My brother and Xiao Yu spent all day holed up in the pharmacy, researching antidotes. A few days ago, my brother finally blushed red and took the wooden hairpin he had been carving for 3 whole months, tucking it into Xiao Yu's hair. With a wedding on the horizon, I had nothing to do all day. I was either playing with birds in the backyard or lying on a rocking chair, soaking up the sun. On a night with beautiful flowers and a full moon, I carried a jar of osmanthus wine and climbed onto the attic roof to drink alone. The wind swept by, and a dark shadow, silent as a ghost, scaled the wall and landed steadily right beside me. He had shed his murderous, heavy armor and changed into a moon-white robe. It was none other than Chu Jinglie. He was holding 2 packages of piping hot beggar's chicken in his hands, with his blade put away. To my surprise, those eyes of his revealed a rare trace of awkwardness. I glanced at him sideways. The grand heir of the border guarding king doesn't take the main gate, but plays the thief scaling walls instead. Chu Jinglie set the beggar's chicken down on the roof tiles, pulled an oil paper packet from his robe, and unwrapped it layer by layer. He carefully revealed a yellowed, old, and frayed handkerchief. In its corner, a single cloud was crookedly embroidered. It was something I had left behind when I was 10 years old. My cheeks burned, betraying my composure.
I kept this right against my heart for 10 years. Whenever I had to crawl out of piles of corpses, it was the only thing that kept me hanging on to my last breath. Do you know how long I've been searching for you? Now it is worn out. Shouldn't you compensate me with a new one?
Flustered under his intense gaze, I forced myself to look away, just for a piece of scrap cloth. Is the heir planning to extort me? Chu Jinglie stepped closer, bringing with him the cool night breeze and a faint scent of bamboo leaves.
I am not extorting you for the handkerchief. I am extorting you for yourself.
He began to ramble about his hardships over the years, saying that now his great vengeance was exacted, and peace had returned to the land. He had instead become a lonely soul without even a home to return to. This living king of hell, who wouldn't blink an eye while slaughtering armies, was now squatting before me, playing the pity card. Even though I knew well enough that he was mostly putting on an act to win my sympathy, the stone in my heart stubbornly softened. I grabbed the wine flask, poured myself a full cup, and drank it down in one gulp. Even though the Yelan sect has closed its doors, I turned around, desperately suppressing the smile tugging at my lips. But the Zhongli family isn't too poor to set an extra pair of chopsticks for you. A sudden, wild joy flared in Chu Jinglie's eyes. Reaching out from behind, he pulled me into his arms in an irresistible embrace.
Just an extra pair of chopsticks isn't enough.
His warm breath brushed past my ear.
I want a marriage certificate, the traditional 3 letters and 6 rites, and a grand bridal procession stretching for miles.
The moonlight, clear as water, stretched their shadows long and far, leaving behind the blades and shadows of the martial world, breaking free from the shackles of societal conventions. This world had finally welcomed a truly bright and peaceful era. Tomorrow would be another fine day to sleep in until noon.